cartoons possess the incredible ability to elicit feelings from audiences in a way that no other medium can. Being able to make viewers empathize with protagonists or even antagonists through writing is an already underappreciated talent in itself. But when it's done through humanizing inanimate objects, animals, or whatever made-up character may appear in a cartoon, and we find ourselves relating to them, there's something uniquely special behind those particular connections. Our best qualities, our trepidations unknown, every sensation can be communicated through animation. But when was the last time a cartoon challenged you? When it introduced an idea or concept that made you question your own way of thinking? Has there ever been an idea so abstract put into your mind that no matter how you feel about the cartoon itself, it remains with you still? 1977's animated theatrical feature, The Mouse and His Child, holds that distinction with me. Based on the 1967 Russell Hoban book of the same name, The Mouse and His Child tells the tale of a pair of toy mice, connected at the hands and powered by a wind-up key on one of their backs. The film follows their adventures of life after being thrown out of a toy store, trying to find their purpose, while being pursued by an evil rat. It sounds straightforward enough, but the film is littered with philosophical quips and musings, not to mention the overall theme of predestination and control over one's life. In a thought experiment so far beyond my comprehension, I still don't think I've begun to understand it even at the most basic of levels. So does the movie strike a balance between existential theories and entertainment, or will it have you walking in circles? Let's get all wound up over The Mouse and His Child. The movie begins with a light snowfall over a town that's winding down for the night, accompanied by a peppy, enjoyable, and upbeat tune, with a singer that falls into that category of, is this a child or is this an adult? Due to the youthfulness of the voice provided by Colin Kellaway, known for his work in the 1960s band The Lollipops. His melodic singing, sounding as if straddling the line of straining, beautifully contradicts the lively jazz underneath. It's a song that never receives any attention, known only by the minuscule collection of devoted fans of this film, but it more than deserves a chance to fall upon more ears. It's a sweet, introspective song too, with lyrics that work on a smaller scale, reflecting what we'll see as the movie continues, with a focus on the unknown and desire for the discovery of purpose and self. Tell me my name. Where am I going? There must be, out in the world it somehow seems I have to find, someone who's mine, and knows my name and who will take me home. As the song plays, we coast through a toy store, with dolls and cars and other assorted figurines, where a tramp and his dog wander outside, watching a new toy through the front window. A small pair of mice, one larger than the other, who hold hands, and when wound up, the larger mouse walks and lifts the tiny one up into the air, which results in the little one doing flips. It's a really cute toy, their smiling faces permanently glued on as they parade around in a circle, and their movements are so contagious, they even inspire the tramp and his dog to do a similar dance of their own. Speaking of the tramp, I absolutely adore the way his hair is drawn. The typical way hair is drawn is to outline where the hair flows to and color within that area. Here, there are straight, longer lines to represent his hair and beard. And rather than have an outline around where his hair ends, the end point of the vertical hairlines act as the outline, and the color, in this case gray, is colored in between the lines. The rest of the art is a glorious display of a blend between the mainstream and underground artistic styles of the 1970s. The mice and toys and surrounding backgrounds look nice, and everything is animated fluidly, but there's a dirty grit to everything, in the vein of Schoolhouse Rock or The Point, where you can see graphite pencil shadings darkening the characters and the backgrounds. The film's shots move quickly, so the artwork may not seem impressive upon first glance, but if you pause it at any point and look at the backgrounds or certain shots, they're beautiful sights to behold. The toy store closes for the night, and as the clock strikes midnight, the objects within come alive. A face emerges from the clock, stuffed toys play their instruments, and the mice talk with each other, their first words innocent, yet profound at the same time, with the smaller one asking, "Papa, where are we? What are we?" It makes me think of the different kinds of consciousness between animals and humans upon birth. Like animals, the second they come to life, they're further along physically than humans, able to walk and navigate their surroundings to a degree. But like people, they inevitably start to question the whys about life. But they're simple questions that can send one down an endless abyss of theoretical contemplations. And the larger Papa Mouse responds with the most honest answer. "I don't know, son." 2 female toys, a pink wind-up elephant and a tin seal balancing a ball on its nose, explain to the mice, which we'll call Papa and Baby going forward, that they're toys, and one day someone will buy them and take them out into the world, which sounds exciting until a rat scurries up to the window pane and scratches it from the outside, the ugly sound matched only by its ghastly grimace, and immediately associates it with nastiness. The baby tries to convince the other toys that they could all stay together and be a family, which is a surprising request, given how he just came into the world a few moments ago. But the clock explains the clockwork rules, which dictate, you do what you're wound to do, not what you want to do, and that the purpose of each toy is specifically what they're designed for. The seal balances the ball, and the elephant walks and swings its trunk, and as if in a trance-like state, the toys begin to perform their functions. Just a few minutes in, and another question arises. Are all living things destined to carry out their intended function whether they want to or not? If they're doing the things they think they want to do, is that what they've been made for, and we just think it's our own choice? Any answers to those questions are interrupted by a jack-in-the-box that maniacally reveals the brutal truths of their existence as toys.
You get stretched and squeezed and covered with jam and lost in the yard. You get left out in the rain, and you get baked in the oven, and you get locked in the freezer, and then you get drowned in the bathtub. That's if you're lucky. Otherwise, the trash barrel.
Which causes the baby to weep, pleading not to be made to go out into the world. And on all the chaos, the mice fall off the display table, without a peep being heard from them after hitting the ground. The clock reminds them there's no crying on or off the job, which could be seen as, even in extreme loss, there's no time to grieve, and life will continue uninterrupted. The mice end up outside in a trash can, with the baby asking, "Is this the world?" And once loaded into a garbage truck, the 2 covered in debris and muck, the baby asks again, "Is this the world?" To which Papa optimistically, or pessimistically, depending on your take, replies, "I hope not." It may not come off as the deepest line of the film, but it does conjure up feelings of being at different stages in life, at the absolute lowest and wondering, is this what life is? And will it always be this way? The mice get dropped off at the dump, found by the tramp and his dog from earlier, and he winds them up and they walk away. The baby begins to feel guilty, saying it's his fault they're out in the world, and the papa tries to comfort him. No, son, it had to happen sooner or later, though walking straight ahead does feel strange, with the baby continuing, "I don't mind walking backwards, Papa. It's better than going in circles. Not if there's no one around to wind you." The baby has a more romantic way of thinking. Moments into their existence at the toy store, despite being told of their fate, he wanted the toys to be a family. Here, with his walking backwards comment, it could be interpreted that he would prefer to go further into life blindly rather than continue on the same cyclical, predetermined path. His father, on the other hand, is more practically minded, shown when he comments that it was inevitable they would venture into the world, or that even though they have newfound freedom, it's not as preferable over familiarity when you don't have the power to propel yourself, both literally and figuratively. He's an interesting case as being considered the father, because what about him makes him the parent other than the baby calling him Papa? He's bigger, but he's just as new to the world as the baby, and doesn't console him in the way an adult would. Rather, he answers the baby's worries with real answers. When they're in the trash and the baby asks if that's the world, he says, "I don't know, I hope not," And further back in the story, he admits to the baby, "I don't know where or what we are." His unfiltered responses don't exactly inspire much confidence in him being a typical parent. But maybe instead of considering him a poor adult figure, maybe it would help to look at him as having the wisdom of adulthood, knowing that there ultimately is no total control they can have over situations. Everything from them waking up in the toy store to being dependent on having to be wound up to move. Unlike the baby, he knows this of the world, but he also lacks the nurturing adult filter, spouting childlike honesty with no ability or even consideration to tell even the smallest lie to relieve his son's fears, making for several moments where his reactions actually heighten the panic between the two. This happens in the next scene when they hear a loud crash, and the baby exclaims he's scared. But instead of reassuring his son, he admits that he's frightened as well. And in a situation where saying anything to quell his son's worries about what might happen to them would be not only welcome, but expected of a parent, he gives an answer that may be worse than inciting even more panic.
Well, something good, son, as easily as something ill. Why, anything can happen.
I appreciate the Schrodinger's cat level of honesty, but for his child's sake, I hoped that the answer would have been different. But it's just another example of how differently these two handle the events. From the scrap emerges Emanuel Wolfington Rat III, who walks them down into a pit and pushes a sardine can gondola through the home of rats engaging in assorted tomfoolery that would be right at home on Pinocchio's Pleasure Island. While Emanuel commiserates with the cheese dealer, the mice meet Frog, a phony oracle with the only truth to him being his lack of self-confidence. The trio end up at Emanuel's home, where he tells of his desire to rule over the dump, boasting of his own greatness and having the sharpest teeth of all the rats. Much to the mice's horror, he divulges their role in his plan, to join other broken and abandoned toys as his slaves. One toy donkey, whose limbs are coming apart at the springs, moans he can't work anymore, and Emanuel's sadistic way of antagonizing him before instructing one of his flunkies to retire him, meaning dismembering him with a wrench and throwing him into a scrap pile. This could have been an extremely scarring scene for young children, but I'm surprised at the restraint it showed in having the torture only seen through shadows. The idea is still scary, but I'm sure this creative choice saved many kids from nightmares. The next day, per Emanuel's instruction, his lackey Ralphie takes the mice with him to steal cheese from the local bank, and along the way, they bump into Frog once more, who offers to tell the mice his fortune. This process begins with him asking the two what they desire from the future. The baby answers surprisingly that he wants the pink elephant to be his mom and the seal to be his sister, and for them all to live together back at the toy store. The dad, on the other hand, wants them to be self-winding, the key from his back removed completely. This is a perfect encapsulation of the aforementioned differences in their outlooks. The baby has a dreamer's mind, wanting something that, in conventional ways, is impossible, but could be seen as wanting the idea of a stable family. On schedule, his father has a reasonable wish, but it also makes you consider the idea of true autonomy. Is it real if someone has to give it to you? Refusing to accept the status quo could very well be considered freedom, but in this case, being able to go where and when they like is their salvation. Suddenly, a beam from the heavens shines on Frog, which possesses him into giving them a mysterious reading. But he's so happy that he was actually able to see the future and tell someone the truth, it doesn't matter to him what it actually means. And it doesn't totally matter to us either. It's just nice to see him so excited for once. After the brief bit of abuse we saw Emanuel inflict on him, being honest makes him happy, and gives us hope for him going forward. Ralphie goes into the bank to rob them of their cheese, but when he's foiled by the Badger security guard, the mice are left alone, until Frog invites himself along their journey, saying that he heard the seal might be in the forest. Emanuel learns of their escape and leaves to pursue them, worried other toys will attempt to follow suit in escaping his clutches. And he goes in style, taking a wind-up car which I love and is something that totally feels in character for him. The heroes continue their quest to an extremely catchy, jazzy rendition of the opening song as they trek across an icy pond. But their good times are foiled by Emanuel, who tosses the mice into his car. He mockingly asks Frog for his fortune, who recites, "A dog shall rise, a rat shall fall," before the two are interrupted by a shrew army and other various predators, including an owl who swoops down and carries Frog away, who drops a gold medal for the mice that reads, "You will succeed." The shrews have a quick but fun musical number, but never return in the movie, which feels like a missed opportunity to have something going on concurrently to the main story and reappear in the end, maybe even tying together. You'd expect some sort of resolution or even mention of it at some point, but strangely, it's never brought up again. The mice, who involuntarily hitch a ride in Emanuel's car, crash, and are left stranded on their sides on the ice, until a dramatic green bird walks them to her theater company, where they learn the seal had been there before leaving with a muskrat. But the mice can't leave, and instead are forced to be players in that evening's production. As they go on stage, Emanuel crashes the party, going on stage and giving a very spirited pro-rat monologue, which is delivered with such conviction, it's easy to get sucked into what he's saying. For everybody, except the audience he's saying it to, who boo and throw tomatoes at him, allowing the bird to escape and drop off the mice at the old muskrat's burrow, who has experience making toys self-winding. The mice look at the steps leading down to the muskrat's home, and with mutual smiles, begin to hop down. The animation of them jumping along with the song is adorable, but they end up falling, waking the muskrat. He explains he made the seal self-winding, but that he no longer is in that line of work, and the expressive frowns and curling of the mice's ears is so disheartening. But their in-return response of asking him to wind them up so they can leave is a funny way of showing how uninterested they are in his story, until they make a deal with him. If they use his axe on a spring machine to make a tree fall down, he'll make them self-winding. And during their task is a wonderfully ridiculous opera song that plays under it. Chop plus time equals smash. I will make such a splash. It's not pedagogic, it's practical logic. Mice times 3 equals crash. It's so over the top for this action, this entire event, let alone the movie, but it somehow fits as something both funny and having full gravitas. Elsewhere, Emanuel continues his hunt, mourning how the mice could be so cruel to leave him after he rescued them and gave them a home, and vows to make them pay when he gets his hands on them. It's a prime example of vindictive narcissism, where he feels that he's the victim in this scenario, and he's justified in retaliating in a potentially violent way. I wonder if he truly does see himself as this unjustly betrayed benevolent, or if he has to clear these mental hurdles to blind himself to his own evil actions, hurting others so nobody can hurt him. The cycle turning him into a horribly selfish creature. Even the pink elephant who Emanuel is riding reminds him he's the villain, and his response is right on cue, berating her.
Pesky pachyderm, good for nothing, not even a last meal. Should have left you in the trash where I found you.
Some time has gone by as we see the snow beginning to melt. Whether it's the next day or season is anyone's guess, but the mice start to look worse for wear, specifically Papa, whose metal is frayed and can feel the rust in his motor spreading. With the task seemingly never ending, a bird snatches them away, leaving the axe to swing one last time, finally chopping it down, and sweeping Frog away in the river, but as fate would have it, it washes him right into the seal. And fate is the word when describing this film. Despite all these events happening in this seemingly random order, getting thrown out of the toy store, meeting Emanuel, traveling with Frog, meeting the theater company, all to put them in a position where they have met this muskrat who can help to make their wishes come true, it all feels bigger than sequential coincidences. It feels like destiny. The bird that has them in his clutches attempts to make them his lunch, but drops them into a pond when he realizes they're inorganic, yelling, "You aren't part of the balance of nature." Obviously his comment is surface level, but it also speaks to something more, like they exist outside of natural life. The way birds are driven to fly and fish to swim, those creatures can't help but follow their intrinsic nature. But the mice aren't part of that natural balance. Maybe their freedom to choose and want to go against their clockwork rules makes them outside of the natural world in that regard. They sink to the bottom of the water, Papa remarking with his normally neutral outlook, "We've survived robbery, war, flood, show business, only to come to this, a watery grave with the last visible dog," which is a can of dog food that has a picture of a dog holding the can with the same label, so it looks like the picture is just repeating forever. And to their surprise, a turtle emerges from the muddy floor, and as they plead for help getting back to the surface, he instead challenges them to find the ultimate truth past the last visible dog on the can of food. And if they can find it, they'll be able to propel themselves back on their journey. Now, this is the part of the movie that made me think in a way that no cartoon really has. The baby and Papa look at the picture of the dog holding the can of food that has the picture to the smallest degree. The baby starts counting the dogs, each one getting smaller than the last, but bigger with each next one, until he finally sees pure nothingness that finally tears away. The baby finally announces he can see past the last visible dog, and he sees infinity. And what he ultimately sees is them. We find out that the label ripped and what he's seeing are their own reflections, but what does it all mean? It's been ingrained in my mind the possibilities this might hold. Now, I can't claim to be an expert or even passably knowledgeable about what this could even begin to mean, but my hypothesis is a positive one. I think the last visible dog is all the different scenarios, every possible outcome, the missed chances, the follow-throughs, the successful and failed attempts. It's every world within a world, each new dog a branch from the one before, an infinite amount of worlds splintered off and created by an endless amount of chosen options. But at the beginning and end of all timelines, all simulations, the one constant looking back from the end of every new world is what was at the start of every possible existence. You, or in this case, the mice. I'm sure there are much more complex or accurate ideas of what this could actually be, but for now, this is my best guess for this incredible concept. It's just then that the seal pops up from behind to rescue them, as they're greeted by a new bird friend, the kingfish and frog, and it's a special, emotional reunion, with baby calling him Uncle Frog, and one of the few times we hear Papa enthusiastic as he happily exclaims, "My true friend." This would be a satisfying place for an ending, but it's upended by Emanuel, who turns this tender moment into the film's most disturbing, by first hurling a stone at Frog, knocking him into the water, then grabbing the mice as they cry in fear, and smashing them against a rock. And unlike the dismemberment of the donkey, this is directly shown. And even though there isn't any blood, their frightened expressions, the salivating bloodthirstiness of Emanuel as he lifts a stone to destroy them, this is one of the most tense scenes in a cartoon. And it's not the violence itself that makes it so disturbing, it's the helplessness of the mice, unable to move even slightly unless powered by the kindness of others, and here they are, about to be destroyed by one creature's selfishness. Emanuel lifts the rock over his head as the mice, broken emotionally and almost completely physically too, look over to the pink elephant, with the baby calling out, "Mama." It's so extremely vulnerable, the last plea crying out for his desired mother. But it's too late, as Emanuel revels in the whimpers of the mice, the metallic crunch as the rock hits their bodies, their painful groans simultaneously reducing in volume and frequency, the last bits of them, their dismembered limbs and knowing faces, fully realizing this is the end. After demolishing them, Emanuel's glee quickly fades into horror, the results of his wild, maniacal actions now staring back at him. And this is a rare moment where, as unsettling as what he did is, it might be that he had the capacity to do it at all that's truly terrifying. His backing away silently is a powerful statement, hiding behind his own hands, and ends as one of the best, though admittedly tragic scenes in not just this movie, but any animated film. That night, the animals gather the pieces of the mice together and take them to the muskrat. It's uncomfortable seeing the mice in this broken state. Maybe it's because we've spent so much time with them beforehand, essentially seeing them being brought into the world. But looking at their heads and quills separated, it's the equivalent of seeing the remains of a real body. The muskrat, good to his word, reassembles them, and it's heartwarming to watch them be put back together, and even the color returns to them. Once again, all done to opera music, only this time, they're also self-winding and separated, their own individual mice now. I was expecting them to still be stuck together, but this was a wonderful, unexpected bonus, and I wouldn't have minded one bit if they had made a bigger deal over it. But their priorities are straight, focusing on rescuing the pink elephant. We see that Emanuel is throwing a party in a dollhouse stuck to a telephone pole. Also, he can power his neon "We love you, Manny" sign. If you needed more evidence of his narcissism, this is your sign. The heroes look onward trying to figure out how to rescue the elephant when the actress bird joins them, giving the baby a vote of confidence, returning his "You will succeed" medal, and agreeing to help with the rescue. While the rats engage in various forms of debauchery, the heroes are pulled up by the pink elephant in a familiar dog food can. And after a successful rescue mission, the heroes fly away in the can, fulfilling the prophecy, "A dog shall rise, a rat shall fall." And if that wasn't enough, the baby drops the medal from the sky, shattering Emanuel's teeth, humiliating him as he laments, "What is a rat with no teeth?" This could have had a much bigger impact had he mentioned the importance of his teeth more than the one time in the beginning of the movie, where he brags to the mice he has the sharpest teeth in the garbage dump. If this were highlighted as more of a source of pride, I think it could have been a more important emotional blow for the audience to accept. But it still works as is. After a failed pursuit of the heroes, Emanuel falls to the ground defeated, but in a different way from how heroes typically defeat villains. None of the toys or animals wanted this to be how things played out. None of them had any ill will toward Emanuel. He was the one to enslave the toys, to verbally and physically harass Frog. None of the heroes look happy with how he's ended up, and it's no more apparent than when they silently look at him in pity before turning away. The silence so piercing, he turns his head and covers his face with his forearm. Even when the baby approaches him, he cowers into a corner, shielding himself. Not from an attack, but from judgment and being looked down upon. In one of my favorite moments in the movie, the baby places the "You will succeed" medal at Emanuel's feet, then walks away, turning one last time and smiling before walking into the night. It says so much about who these characters are. Despite Emanuel enslaving and eventually destroying the mice, the baby is still able to forgive and even wish him happiness in his life. On the opposite end, we see Emanuel shamed for the weak animal he is. Even his worst deeds couldn't stop the goodness of others. And although his story is over, you'd like to think he might find the kindness within himself that he was shown in his worst moment. Next, we see a quick and visually interesting wedding scene between Papa and the elephant, where all the characters are in constant movement, as is the viewpoint, shifting under and over in all sorts of directions. It sticks out due to this being the first time we see any sort of perspective like this in the film. It's unique for sure, but also a bit disorienting. The wedding scene does wrap up the mice's story, but most importantly, we get to see their fortunes fulfilled. The baby got the family he wanted, and the papa's wish of being self-winding came true too. It makes me think of the contrasting ideas of freedom and predestination, and maybe they're more connected than they seem. If we're on a path towards our fate, who's to say it can't be changed? If fate is permanent, maybe there are branching ways to get there. Maybe the inevitable can't be altered, but perhaps the belief that you're in control of your own destiny, maybe that's what freedom truly is. At the end, the tramp peeks into the dollhouse, now outfitted with the last visible dog sticker on the front, and sees it empty, at least from our point of view, and says, "Be happy," before closing the doors and walking down the train tracks with his trusty dog. The Mouse and His Child is a movie that lives in two worlds. It's a spry adventure film, but also one that raises complex theoretical questions if you watch closely enough. This wasn't enough to resonate with audiences, though. as it made only $1.6 million at the box office. Despite its indifference to the mainstream, it's absolutely worth viewing, and I'd best describe it as a good entryway into more fantastically abstract pieces of media, like The Phantom Tollbooth or A Wrinkle in Time. It's one of those stories where the ideas it brings up, you can't help but have keep popping into your head over and over again, repeated forever, just like The Last Visible Dog.